So Drew Ayers is assistant academic specialist in the program in Media and Screen Studies. He got his PhD from Georgia State University, and his current research project theorizes, and here I have to read, a non-human phenomenology of visual culture, drawing from work in animal studies, eco-criticism, post-humanist theory, and object-oriented ontology. You have 5 minutes to unpack each of these keywords.
That's why I'm reading. I have a habit of going off on tangents, so I'm going to stick to the script in the interest of time. So this is kind of what I like to think of as a physiological restructuring of a lot of the work I did in my dissertation. So it's kind of a kernel of an upcoming project. So I'll start there. So this presentation, it's a short summary of work that I presented a couple weeks ago at the Society for Cinema and Media Studies conference in Chicago. And it's also something I'm working on in the context of a larger book project that examines the role of the non-human and animality in the experience of contemporary media and visual culture. It's a project that's concerned with theorizing a non-human or a post-human phenomenology, and I'll unpack some of these things. One that accounts for the experience of media in terms of its multilocality, telepresence, and telesthesia. In today's presentation, I want to introduce issues of distance, space, and time as they relate to two seemingly unrelated products of contemporary visual culture, performance capture and remote telesurgery. What initially drew me to this project was a random encounter between images in a Google search while I was working on a different project on special effects and animated space. Seeing these images together made me think, in what ways is this, the technology and experience of motion capture, similar to this, the technology and experience of remote robotic surgery? How does each technological assemblage, through its dispersion of the human throughout a network, reconfigure the experience of movement, time, and space? How does each alter the scale at which the performer, or surgeon, as well as the viewer or patient, senses and perceives the world? How does each enact a sensual, proprioceptive experience of technology? In what ways does each think through the relationship between the analog and the digital? And in what ways does each crystallize contemporary fantasies of disembodiment and informationalism? Now, these are obviously clearly quite expansive questions, but I wanted to give you some preliminary thoughts about the relationship between the phenomenology of performance capture and remote surgery technologies. Performance capture technologies have featured prominently in mainstream special effects cinema and video games, including the Lord of the Rings trilogy, the Hobbit trilogies, Avatar, King Kong, Rise of the Planet of the Apes, Heavy Rain, and LA Noire, and the final two are video games, to name some of the more prominent examples. Concurrent with the development of performance capture technologies has been the development and implementation of robotic remote surgery, a technology that allows a surgeon, using a distinctly video game-like apparatus, to perform a procedure on a patient in a different location to that of the surgeon. While performance capture and remote surgery might be employed for different reasons in divergent contexts, that of the media industries and the medical military industries respectively, they each produce a human-machine assemblage that enacts itself across different scales. Each technology captures a performance, translates that performance into digital information, recodes that performance into another body, be it the robotic or digital synthespian, which can then be experienced in the analog body of the patient or viewer. Each performer is in many ways acting as a puppeteer, manipulating an extension of his or her body through time and space. The shift in scale produced by each technology in terms of movement, perception, experience, and sensation demonstrates the extent to which these technologies of telepresence foster a multi-local experience of the body, the dispersion of authorial control across the human-machine assemblage, and a reinforcement of embodied experience despite an embrace of widespread cultural fantasies of the disembodiment of information. So this idea that you can upload your brain into a computer and that would somehow replicate the embodied experience of a person. So one of my primary claims is that both of these technologies, performance capture and remote surgery, penetrate the materiality of the body, and they reconstitute that materiality elsewhere, as a human's bodily movements are captured, transmitted, translated, and finally recoded into that of another body, be it physical, the surgical robot, or digital, the animated synthespian. So what I'm really concerned with is how, what's the link between the two, right? So you have the actor, then you have the digital visualization. what is the weight? What is the experience? What is the materiality of that motion capture or performance captured body? So both of these technologies rely on an extension of the human subject through technology and digital translation. This idea of translation is also key because obviously it's not a direct one-to-one correspondence. It goes through various processes of computer coding, both by the computer but also by the sensation of the bodies. So they rely on this extension of the human subject through technology of digital translation into a robotic or digital avatar. And so again, the robot also translates the movements of the surgeon. And at the same time, these avatars provide feedback. So it's a relationship. They provide feedback to their human counterparts, creating a recursive loop of perception and experience. And what's important to emphasize here is that this is an embodied and intersensorial experience of telepresence. The materiality is vital to this. Not only in terms of the ways in which the human subject is extended across time and space, but also in terms of the ways in which this extension itself alters the nature of perception experience. So this is the other key question I'm concerned with is not only how does it go this way, but how does it come back, right? So in the terms of motion capture, you have you're able to witness, the actor can see his or her digital puppet, if you want to call it that. But I don't necessarily like that term. But how they can see the digital puppet and then react and modify the actual performance according to that. Same thing with the surgeon. There's haptic feedback systems. That's why I liken it to a kind of this fantasy of this complete virtual reality, where there's this haptic experience between the surgeon and the physical body, where if you feel pressure, when you're doing sutures, there's a feedback to it. So both remote surgery and performance capture offer us a meditation on the complexity of subjectivity and embodiment within a network, while at the same time providing a snapshot of the tension between embodiment and disembodiment in contemporary digital culture. And so that the other key question is, what is that when we have authorial control spread across the network like this, right? Where who is doing the surgery? Is it the surgeon, or is it the robot, or is it some sort of assemblage? Because it can refine movements and things like that. And then lastly, this idea of embodiment within digital technologies, which is a key question. So I'll stop there. Thank you.